All right. I'm starting the lecture on rabies. I know this is out of order, but honestly, it's the shortest one, and so instant gratification, I get to check this off my list. And then I will go back and I'll do the lectures on hepatitis and herpes for you. So, starting out, rabies is a virus. It's been around for a while. It's a really, really scary virus that people have been afraid of for a really long time. Now, rabies has been known by a couple different names. It used to be named hydrophobia because a lot of people who have rabies, they're not specifically afraid of like water, like swimming, but they're afraid of drinking or swallowing water. So rabies affects the central nervous system, and it can cause either paralysis or it can cause changes in behavior, hallucinations, hydrophobia, aggression. So often this is aggression, but it's really a change in behavior. So any really significant personality change. So Louis Pasteur developed a vaccine, and this was really monumental at the time. And he used spinal tissue from rabid animals and dried it out in the process, attenuating or inactivating the virus. And then he did a really crude preparation from that and then used that as a vaccine. This was tested on dogs, and then it was tested on a boy who he was the first one, a boy who had been bitten by a rabid dog, and it worked. And here, this guy, he was protecting some children from a rabid dog, and he got bitten, and he was the second person to get the rabies vaccine, and so they made a statue for this guy. All right, so rabies is worldwide. This is a problem all over the world, except for maybe Australia. But this is a problem in America, Europe, Asia, India, China, in particular, Africa and India and China, in the more rural areas, or in areas where they have more wild packs of dogs roaming around. But this can be spread by all sorts of mammals, and it's a worldwide problem. So the World Health Organization estimates that over 10 million people annually get bitten by a rabid or suspected rabid animal and need treatment. The treatment is relatively expensive, and in some parts of the world, people can't afford the treatment. More than 55,000 rabies-related deaths every year, or 150 every day worldwide. So this is a really big problem. Now, reservoirs. Historically, people have always used the rabid dog as the fear of rabies. Dogs used to be, in America, one of the more common reservoirs, but now it's actually bats in America. But any animal, so here's a mongoose, we've got raccoons, foxes, squirrels, lots and lots and lots of different mammals can act as reservoirs for rabies. In the United States, it's actually bats that are the most common. So if we're looking at the number of rabid animals, it used to be raccoons as we kind of go through time, but actually bats have become one of the most common now. And we still, though, I mean, depending on where you are in the country, you've got the ranges of different species, and all of these can act as reservoirs. So the origin of the name, to do violence, because people tend to become more aggressive when they're infected with rabies. And the first described case was in 1546. It may have been around before that, but this is when it was first written down. And so since then, people have been pretty terrified of rabies because once the neurologic symptoms start, you die. Like it has a near 100% mortality after the neurologic symptoms start. So we've undergone a lot of programs around the world and in the United States to try to combat this. So in the U.S., one of the things that we do is we put a rabies vaccine in baits. So this is something that's tasty, and hopefully animals pick it up and eat it. And this is to reduce the presence of rabies in these animal reservoirs. So I'm gonna show a brief video here about some efforts that are being taken to reduce rabies and also the effect that rabies can have on a community.
This dog had run down the street here and it's bitten 3 massive dogs. I think I'm feeling a bit shocked, to be honest. I mean, I've seen rabid dogs before and it's frightening. This is what it's all about, you know, finding these dogs, protecting these people, protecting the other dogs. This is exactly why we're here.
Death as a consequence of rabies is one of the most unpleasant, distressing deaths that you could possibly have.
As soon as you see the first symptoms of rabies, even the very first one, a tingling in the hands or a child becoming slightly disorientated, then death is inevitable.
Chithandizo kuti mwanayo akhaleso ndi moyo koma ndinali okhuzidwa kwambiri tabiro chipalala doko komanso pamene chiwewe chibe mankhwala muzingodikira tsiku.
The patients who are admitted here in this cell will die within 48 to 72 hours, even in spite of treatment.
What you should expect is death in no time.
These kids go up to the puppies, if the puppies have rabies, they bite the kids, story over. That's it. A child dies every hour because of rabies in India. And what we're doing is protecting those dogs. Most importantly, is protecting these kids.
Well, Dogs Trust is partnering with Mission Rabies to deliver mass vaccination campaigns in some of the rabies hotspots of the world.
It's HUA! We want to vaccinate your dogs for free against rabies! Nearly all human cases of rabies are caused by dog bites, so we're working with local organisations and governments to run mass canine vaccination programmes in global rabies hotspots. And what's fantastic is we've got international teams all coming together to catch and vaccinate as many dogs as possible.
There's a great energy in the project, but it's essential that we do this in a scientific way and vaccinate 70% of the dog population and cut that disease cycle.
Having scientific proof and support is the absolute bedrock of the Mission Rabies approach.
Without the collaboration of both hospital, public health doctors and the veterinary services, we've got no hope of curing rabies.
These guys here, they all work for the training centre which Dogs Trust have funded and helped us really, get going. Without them, none of this happens.
It was kind of fear of the unknown. You're not really sure what you're going to go into, but it's been better than anything I thought it was going to be.
And being able to sort of do pioneering work like this and also representing Dogs Trust is such a cool opportunity.
People are presenting dogs to us for vaccination and are desperate for help as well. I think a great thing for Mission Rabies and for Dogs Trust is sort of educating the people about what we're doing here.
Doesn't matter where we work in the world, one of the key things to the success of these projects and their sustainability is winning over the local communities, making sure they understand what we're doing and why.
To come back years later to see that these families are actually still experiencing the same grief as if it has just occurred the same day, I feel as a medical practitioner we have let this family down.
I see many children die, and it's always distressing to watch children die with a disease that you know was completely preventable.
It's entirely preventable by vaccination of dogs and by post-exposure vaccination of adults and children that are bitten. Sadly, both of those things have been lacking in Malawi, so a lot of people die unnecessarily here.
Mission Rabies, I think, has given the NGOs the opportunity to dream a big dream, to reach for something which perhaps is difficult.
Mission Rabies is a ray of light in a situation of darkness, and I'm so grateful for it.
We are delighted to have the input of Mission Rabies, that we would see so many children potentially saved.
If everybody join hands together, they will definitely achieve this goal of eradication of rabies from India. Soon.
And they say in unity there is strength, in unity there's amazing strength. And I think we have to make this program a genuine success.
We're going to show that rabies can be prevented through mass vaccination drives, through our education projects.
We can't change the world, but what we can do is fight this corner. And that's our corner. It's our corner to champion, do everything we can. And we can and will make a difference in this.
So these vaccination programs, whether it's the government trying to vaccinate wildlife in the States or people trying to vaccinate dogs around the world, it's a really big job, but it's important because after you contract rabies, you have a really limited window of time where you can have an effective treatment. So there are two forms of rabies, and I didn't name these. I was not consulted, but you've got furious rabies, which is its actual term. Encephalitic rabies is another term for that, or paralytic rabies, or again, I didn't name it, but it's actually called dumb rabies. So we've got furious or dumb rabies, or encephalitic or paralytic rabies, and you'll see both sets of terms. The incubation period can be short, a few days, or it could be very, very rarely several years. That's really uncommon. Usually the incubation period is about 2 to 3 months. So you get the bite in muscle tissue, and then it replicates in the muscle tissue for a few days or a couple months. And the prodromal symptoms, you might notice headache, malaise, fever, right, kind of your general flu-like symptoms. Also anorexia, nausea, or vomiting. Now, during the incubation period or the prodromal period, you can get a post-exposure vaccine. After the prodromal period and you enter the neurological phase, this is when the virus has entered your nervous system. At this point, there's really not any good options for you, and death is imminent. So we've got in furious rabies, hydrophobia, difficulty swallowing, agitation, anxiety, altered behavior. So frequently this is hyper aggressiveness, hallucinations, hypersalivation, biting, violent contractions of the diaphragm. So this virus spreads through saliva. So one of the later stages is that foaming at the mouth, like you would see like dogs foaming at the mouth, or in people they can have hypersalivation. And dogs, other animals, and people tend to bite more. This is caused by the virus, and it helps it spread. So this is furious rabies. So this is option A. Option B is paralytic or dumb rabies. And you don't have those characteristic features that you do with furious rabies, but you do have an ascending paralysis. So you lose sensation, you might get like a tingling numbness feeling, and then that proceeds to a weakness, and this spreads up your body. Now, hydrophobia, I'm going to show you a really brief video here on what hydrophobia looks like. So it's a fear of swallowing, and these patients are thirsty. They have excessive thirst, but they're really hard. They're very afraid of swallowing, of eating or drinking. So they're suffering dehydration, but they're afraid of the water. They're afraid of drinking and swallowing. There's another YouTube video that I won't play for you now, but it's in the links under additional study materials. I'm discussing what nerve cells, what cells, what parts of the brain that rabies infects, and what can lead to those symptoms, which is an interesting video for you guys to watch. All right, so the big take home here from what we've learned so far is that rabies has a pretty long incubation period, and then you have a prodromal period, and then you've got your neurologic phase. And you absolutely have to have the vaccine before the neurological phase starts. If you are already experiencing hydrophobia, it's too late and death is imminent. So it's very, very important to get that vaccine before the neurologic phase of illness. And we're going to leave off here, and then we'll pick up with the rest of the slides, the rest of the lecture in part 2.